Welcome back to Whispers in the Dark, the place where love letters rot, roses bruise, and the softest promises can hide the sharpest teeth. Now settle in, because tonight's story begins the way so many Valentine's nights do, with a table set for two. The first thing Sophie noticed about February 14th in Briar Hollow was how the town tried too hard. It wasn't a big place, a shallow valley cupped between dark hills where fog loved to pool, and the pine trees leaned inward as if sharing secrets. In summer, Briar Hollow could pass for charming. In autumn, it pretended to be quaint. But in February, it became a set dressed for a play no one wanted to be in, paper hearts in shop windows, red ribbons wrapped around lampposts, plastic roses tied to mailboxes that rattled like loose teeth when the wind came down from the hills. The cold here wasn't clean. It was damp, threaded with wood smoke and wet earth. It crept into your sleeves, into the seams of your boots, into your breath. It made every sound sharper. A car door closing in the distance felt like a gunshot. A dog barking 2 streets away sounded like it was right behind you. Sophie moved through town with her collar up and her hands in her pockets, trying not to look at the decorations, trying not to look at the couples, trying not to look like she was alone. She told herself it didn't matter. She wasn't the kind of person who needed the day to be anything. She wasn't 13 anymore, folding a note into a heart and hoping someone would pick her. She wasn't 21, sitting on a stranger's couch, pretending the music was good while waiting for the moment the night turned disappointing. She wasn't even 30 anymore. 34 had a weight to it, a quiet firmness. Sophie had rent due. Sophie had a job and a calendar and groceries. Sophie had a life. But the truth was, being alone on Valentine's Day in Briar Hollow felt like you were wearing a sign. She walked past the florist, Vera's Blooms, where bouquets crowded the window like a congregation. The smell of lilies and roses seeped through the door whenever it opened, sweet and heavy. She saw Vera herself inside, hair pinned up, cheeks flushed, wrapping a dozen red roses in brown paper. Vera glanced up and caught Sophie's eye and smiled too brightly, the way people did when they were trying to be kind without pitying you. Sophie looked away. She turned the corner onto Main Street, where the bakery had heart-shaped cookies stacked like bricks, iced in pink and red. There was a chalkboard sign out front that read, "Love is sweet. Don't forget your honey." Someone had drawn a cartoon bee. Sophie almost laughed. Almost. Then her phone buzzed. A message. She stopped in the shadow of an awning and pulled her phone out, expecting perhaps her sister, Lena, sending her another meme about being single and thriving. But it was Lena. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hi, Sophie. I'm Daniel. We matched a few days ago. Hope it's okay," I texted. "I know it's last minute, but I'd love to take you to dinner tonight." Sophie blinked, frowning. She opened the dating app to confirm. There it was. Daniel H. 38, chef/hospitality, profile picture smiling in warm lighting, a little stubble kind eyes, the kind of face that had learned how to look safe. She had matched with him, yes, 2 nights ago, during a bout of insomnia, doom-scrolling profiles, while the wind worried her windows. They exchanged a few messages. Nothing intense, just simple, polite conversation. He asked about her move to Briar Hollow last year, why her move from the city to a small town shift. She said she wanted quieter. He joked that Briar Hollow was quiet until the coyotes started singing. He said he cooked. She said she liked to read. He said he'd make her a meal someday. She'd put a laughing emoji and gone to bed. Now he was asking for dinner tonight. Valentine's Day. Sophie stared at the message. The old instinct rose. Say no. Say you're busy. Say you're tired. Say you don't do Valentine. Say anything that kept the night predictable. But predictability had been suffocating her lately. The winter had been long and gray. She spent too many evenings listening to the radiators knock, too many nights watching the same shows, eating the same dinner alone. She moved here for quiet, yes, but quiet wasn't supposed to feel like being forgotten. And Daniel's message was gentle, not pushy, just an offer. She typed back, "Hi Daniel, dinner could be nice. Where?" His reply came fast. "I'd love to cook for you, if that's not weird. I have a small place just outside town. Cozy, candlelit, no crowded restaurants. I promise it's safe and normal, just a good meal and good conversation." Sophie felt something tighten in her chest. A voice, her mother's voice, maybe, or her own from years ago, said, "Don't go to a man's house on the first date." But it wasn't exactly a first date. They'd talked, and he'd said it was safe, and he lived just outside town, which could mean 5 minutes down the road. Briar Hollow was full of houses tucked into trees like shy animals, and she didn't want to spend another Valentine's Day pretending she didn't care. She hesitated, then typed, "Okay, but I'll drive myself." Another immediate reply, "Of course, I'll send the address. 7:30, dress warm. The road gets icy." A pin dropped onto her map. A farmhouse symbol on the edge of the valley, where the pines thickened and the roads turned into narrow ribbons. Sophie looked at the address and felt a faint, involuntary shiver. Not fear exactly, just the awareness of distance. The way being just outside town could become a long way from anyone. She told herself she was being dramatic. She wrote, 7:30 works. Then she put her phone away and started walking again. But now every Valentine decoration felt like a warning sign, disguised as a joke. She spent the afternoon preparing, like she was going into a meeting. She showered. She dried her hair. She stood in front of her closet and tried to choose something that said, "I'm not desperate, but I'm not closed off." She settled on a dark green sweater dress and black tights, boots with good traction. She put on a little makeup, enough to look alive, not enough to look like she'd tried. At 6:40, Lena called. "Tell me you're not staying in." her sister said, without preamble. Sophie held the phone between shoulder and ear as she fixed an earring. I'm not. Oh, Lena's voice sharpened with interest. Spill. It's nothing, Sophie said too quickly. Just someone from the app asked me out. Lena made a sound. On Valentine's Day. That's either adorable or a red flag. Thanks. I'm just saying, adorable or red flag. What's his name? Where are you going? Sophie paused. The question felt heavier than it should have. His name, Daniel. We're having dinner. Where? At his place. There was silence on the line. Then Lena said, very carefully, Sophie. It's fine. Sophie. He cooks. It's like a date. People do that. Yes, and sometimes they get murdered, Lena snapped, then caught herself and exhaled. Okay, sorry. I'm not trying to freak you out. I'm trying to keep you alive. I'm driving myself. Good, send me his address. Sophie hesitated. A flare of pride. A flare of annoyance. But beneath it, something softer. Gratitude. She opened the text thread and forwarded the pin to Lena. There, she said, happy. Not happy, slightly less panicked. I'll text you when I get there. And when you leave, Lena added. And if you don't, I'll call. And if you don't answer, You'll what? Sophie teased, trying to lighten it. I'll call the police and tell them my sister. On a Valentine date with a man who thinks cozy farmhouse is a normal first date setting. Sophie laughed, but it came out thin. Okay, I'll text. Be careful, Lena said, softer now. And if something feels off, you leave. You don't be polite. You don't be nice. You don't worry about his feelings. You leave. I will, Sophie promised. She hung up and stared at her reflection for a moment. Her face looked composed, but her eyes held a question she wouldn't ask out loud. What if something does feel off? She swallowed and grabbed her coat. Outside, the sky was a bruised purple. The air smelled like snow, metallic and sharp. Sophie's car started with a reluctant cough, and she drove out of town along the main road, then turned onto a narrower one that wound into the trees. The further she went, the quieter it got. Houses thinned, lights became rare. The pines grew taller, their branches heavy, their needles whispering in the wind. The road had been plowed, but patches of ice glinted like glass. Her headlights carved tunnels through the darkness. She checked her phone at a stop sign. No service. Of course, she thought. Of course there's no service. She kept driving. The GPS still worked, at least. A blue line leading her deeper into the valley's edge. She passed a small, abandoned-looking church. A rusted sign. A cemetery with crooked stones, half swallowed by snow. The kind of place that belonged in a story people told around campfires. At 7:24, she turned onto a gravel driveway marked by 2 stone pillars. There was a mailbox with the name Harris painted in faded black letters. Harris, Daniel Harris. The driveway curved through trees and opened into a clearing. And there it was, a farmhouse, not a haunted ruin, not a crumbling shack. It looked cared for. White siding, dark roof, warm light in the windows, smoke rising from a chimney, a porch with 2 rocking chairs, and a wreath made of pine and red berries. Sophie's shoulders relaxed an inch. She parked and sat for a moment, listening to the ticking of her cooling engine. Somewhere in the woods, something moved. A crackle of branches, a distant owl. Then her phone buzzed. 1 bar of service had flickered in. "Lena, you there?" Sophie typed, "Just pulled up. Looks normal. We'll text after dinner." She sent it, then got out of the car. The cold hit her like a slap. It smelled of pine sap and smoke. Her boots crunched on gravel. The porch boards creaked under her weight as she climbed the steps. The door opened before she could knock. Daniel stood there, smiling like he'd been waiting behind it. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered, wearing dark jeans and a button-down shirt with sleeves rolled to his forearms. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd just washed it. The warm light behind him made him look golden. "Sophie," he said, and her name sounded practiced in his mouth, like he'd been saying it all day. "You made it. Please come in. It's freezing out there." His voice was warm too. Smooth. The kind of voice that could talk you into trusting it. Sophie stepped inside. Heat wrapped around her. The air smelled incredible garlic, rosemary, something rich simmering. Candlelight flickered on a table set near the window. 2 plates, real cloth napkins, wine glasses. A vase with red roses, the petals dark as blood. "Wow," Sophie said honestly. "You really did this." Daniel smiled wider. "I told you, no crowded restaurants, just a meal, a little peace." Sophie took off her coat. The house felt older but renovated. Wooden floors, a stone fireplace, bookshelves, a few framed photos on the wall, landscapes, not people. The kind of decor that was tasteful but impersonal. As she walked further in, she noticed something subtle. The curtains were drawn in every room, even though the windows faced only trees. "Can I take your coat?" Daniel asked. She handed it over. His fingers brushed hers. His touch was warm. "You have a lovely home," she said, looking around. "It's small," he said, "but it's mine. I like being out here. It's quiet." Sophie nodded. Quiet. The same reason she'd come to Briar Hollow. Daniel gestured toward the table. "Sit. I'll pour wine if you drink." "I do," Sophie said, lowering into the chair. The wood was smooth under her fingertips. The candlelight made everything feel softer, less real, like a painting. Daniel poured a dark red wine. When he set the glass in front of her, he held it for a fraction of a second too long, his hand lingering as if reluctant to let go. "Cheers," he said, lifting his own glass. "To a nice dinner," Sophie said. "To new beginnings," Daniel corrected gently. They drank. The wine was good, warm. It loosened something in Sophie's chest. Daniel brought out the first course, something creamy, with mushrooms and herbs. He watched her take the first bite, his gaze steady, attentive. "It's amazing," she said after chewing. "You weren't kidding about cooking." He looked pleased in a way that felt more intense than a compliment should deserve. "Food is love," he said. "The real kind. The kind you make with your hands." Sophie smiled politely. "I can't say I'm much of a cook." "You don't have to be," Daniel said, leaning back. "You just have to appreciate." The conversation flowed easily at first. He asked about her job at the library in town, her favorite authors, her move from the city. He listened carefully, almost too carefully, like he was filing away details. When she asked about him, he said he'd worked in restaurants for years, in bigger towns, but got tired of the chaos. He'd bought the farmhouse cheap, fixed it up. "Do you have family around here?" Sophie asked. Daniel's smile didn't change, but something behind it tightened. "Not anymore," he said. Then he lifted his glass. "But I don't like to dwell." Sophie nodded, sensing a boundary. The second course came: roasted chicken, potatoes, green beans, everything perfectly seasoned. The smell alone made her mouth water. He moved around the kitchen with confidence, comfortable in the space. It was, she told herself, normal. And yet, as she ate, Sophie kept noticing little things. The way Daniel's eyes tracked her constantly, as if he couldn't bear to look away. The way he asked questions that were slightly too specific. "Do you live alone?" he asked casually. "Yes," Sophie said, then added, "My sister in the city." "How often do you talk?" Sophie hesitated. "Pretty often." Daniel nodded, like that information mattered. "What time do you usually get home from the library?" he asked next, still in that conversational tone, as if discussing weather. Sophie's fork paused midair. "It depends," she said lightly. "Why?" Daniel smiled, just making conversation. Sophie forced a small laugh and took another sip of wine. The warmth in her chest shifted, became something else, a small alertness. She reminded herself not to overthink. People asked those questions. People were curious. But the house was very quiet, not the peaceful quiet of countryside. A different quiet, the kind that felt like it was pressing in from the walls. At one point, she heard a sound from somewhere deeper in the house. A soft thump, like something shifting. Daniel saw her glance up. "Old house," he said quickly. "Settles, makes noises." "Right," Sophie said, though the sound had seemed deliberate. She ate slower. When the plates were cleared, Daniel brought out dessert, chocolate cake with raspberries. He lit another candle, as if the room needed more warmth. "Tell me," Daniel said after a moment, cutting into his cake, but not eating. "Do you like surprises?" Sophie blinked. "Depends on the surprise." He smiled. "I think you'll like mine." Something cold crawled up the back of her neck. "Surprise," she echoed, keeping her voice light. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. A ring box. Sophie's breath caught. It was too much. Too soon. It had to be a joke, a prop, something dramatic. Daniel set the box on the table between them, not opening it. "Before you misunderstand," he said softly, "it's not what you think." Sophie stared at it like it might bite. "Okay." Daniel leaned forward. Candlelight flickered across his face. "It's a symbol," he said. "A promise. Not marriage. Not yet. But intention." Sophie's heart beat harder. "Daniel, we've known each other for what, 2 days?" His smile didn't move. "I've known you longer than that," he said, and his tone made it sound like a romantic confession. Sophie's blood went cold. "What?" she said. Daniel reached out and touched the ring box with one finger, caressing the velvet. "Briar Hollow is small," he murmured, "and you stand out. A woman alone. A woman who reads late at night with the curtains open. A woman who walks down Main Street like she's trying not to be seen." Sophie's chair scraped back without her meaning to move. Her throat tightened. That's not. "You don't have to be afraid," Daniel said quickly, like he'd heard the fear in her voice. "I'm not a threat to you. I'm the opposite. I'm the one who sees you. I'm the one who appreciates you. I'm the one who could keep you safe." Sophie stood. "I should go." Daniel's eyes sharpened. "Sophie." "I said I should go," she repeated, voice trembling despite her effort. Daniel's hand rested flat on the table. "Sit," he said softly. The word was quiet, but it carried weight. Command. Sophie's stomach turned. She took a step back toward the entryway. "I'm not comfortable," she said. "This is too much." Daniel's expression flickered, just for a heartbeat. Something dark and impatient beneath the warmth. Then it smoothed again. "You're right," he said gently, standing too. "I'm sorry. I got carried away. It's Valentine's Day. People get emotional." Sophie swallowed, still moving backward. "Yeah, I thank you for dinner. It was great. But I should." Daniel lifted both hands, palms out, a gesture of peace. "Of course. Let me get your coat." He turned toward the closet where he'd hung it. Sophie's relief came like a rush. Maybe she'd overreacted. Maybe he was just awkward. Maybe. Then she saw it. Her car keys, sitting on the hallway table by the door. She hadn't put them there. Her pockets were empty. Sophie's mouth went dry. Daniel reached the closet, and Sophie moved quickly, grabbing her keys from the table. Her fingers shook. She wrapped her hand around them like a weapon, the metal biting into her palm. Daniel turned, coat in hand. He saw the keys in her fist. Something in his eyes changed. Not anger exactly, more like disappointment, as if she'd failed a test. "You weren't going to leave without saying goodbye, were you?" he asked. Sophie forced herself to keep moving toward the door. "I am saying goodbye. Now." Daniel stepped closer. "Sophie, it's icy. Let me walk you to your car." "No," Sophie said. Daniel smiled. "Don't be rude." The word rude struck her like a slap. Like he was rewriting the situation, making her the bad guy. Sophie's hand found the doorknob. She twisted. It didn't move. Her breath caught. Locked. Daniel's voice came from behind her, soft and almost tender. "It's for your safety," he said. "I wouldn't want you slipping." Sophie yanked harder. The knob rattled uselessly. "Open it," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Daniel took another step. "Sophie," he said again, and her name sounded like a leash. "You're upset. Sit. We'll talk. You'll feel better in a minute." Sophie turned, backing away from the door. "No," she whispered. "No, I opened the door." Daniel's gaze dropped to her hand, to the keys, then lifted back to her face. "You know," he said quietly, "I always forget how quickly people show you who they really are. The moment you offer them something real, they panic." Sophie's mind raced. She scanned the room, fireplace poker, heavy candlestick, anything. Her eyes landed on the phone on the table. Her phone. She hadn't checked it. She lunged toward it. Daniel moved faster. He caught her wrist. His grip was iron. Pain flared up Sophie's arm. She gasped. Daniel's face was close now. His breath smelled faintly of wine and herbs. "No calls," he said, as if explaining a house rule. "Not tonight." Sophie jerked back, trying to twist free. "Let go." Daniel's grip tightened. "Stop," he hissed, and the warmth in his voice vanished. "Stop it." Fear surged in Sophie, like electricity. She drove her knee up, hard into his thigh. Daniel grunted, staggered, his hand loosening. Sophie ripped free and stumbled backward, knocking her chair over. The crash echoed in the house like a shout. Daniel's eyes widened not with pain, but with something else. A flicker of excitement. He smiled. "Oh," he murmured, almost reverent. "There you are." Sophie's stomach dropped. "You're the one I hoped you'd be," Daniel said softly, stepping forward again. "The one who fights." Sophie grabbed the overturned chair and swung it between them like a shield. "Stay back." Daniel lifted his hands again, but this time it wasn't peace. It was performance. "Izzy," he said, "you're making this ugly." Sophie's voice came out raw. "Open the door or I'm screaming." Daniel tilted his head. "Scream," he said. "The woods will scream back. No one will hear you. No one will come." Sophie's mouth went dry. She remembered the dead service, the empty roads, the trees pressing close. Daniel's smile returned small, satisfied. "I didn't pick tonight by accident," he said. "Valentine's Day, people expect a woman to be somewhere, with someone. If she isn't, they assume she chose to be alone. If she disappears, they assume she ran off with a lover. Or she got drunk. Or she made a mistake." Sophie stared at him, her breath shaking. Daniel stepped closer, voice almost dreamy. "And you did come, Sophie. You came to me." Something in her mind snapped into clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't awkward romance. This was a trap. Daniel moved toward the kitchen, casual, unhurried, like he was done pretending. He opened a drawer. Sophie's eyes tracked his hand. Metal glinted. A knife, not a small paring knife. A long chef's knife, its blade reflecting candlelight. He held it lightly, comfortably, like it belonged in his hand. Sophie backed toward the living room, toward the fireplace. Her fingers closed around the iron poker resting beside it. Heavy, cold. Daniel turned back, knife down at his side. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, as if hurt was optional. "I just want you to understand, to stop fighting the thing you need." Sophie's heart hammered. "You're sick," she whispered. Daniel's smile twitched. "That's what they always say," he said, "when they realize they're not in control." Sophie's eyes flicked to the windows. Curtains drawn, but behind them glass. If she could get to one, smash it, crawl out. Daniel must have read the thought. "Don't," he said simply. Sophie tightened her grip on the poker. Daniel took a step. Sophie swung. The poker connected with his forearm with a sickening thud. Daniel cursed, knife clattering to the floor. His face twisted pain, anger, disbelief. Sophie didn't wait. She ran. She sprinted past the table, past the roses, toward the nearest window. She ripped the curtain aside. Darkness, trees. She raised the poker and slammed it into the glass. The window cracked, a spiderweb of fractures. She hit again. The glass shattered inward with a sharp, ringing crash. Cold air rushed in. Snowflakes swirled like ash. Sophie dropped the poker, grabbed the sill, and began to climb through. A hand seized the back of her dress and yanked. Sophie screamed, raw and full of terror. Daniel dragged her backward. She clawed at the sill, scraping her palms on broken glass. Pain bloomed bright and hot. She kicked, her boot catching Daniel in the chest, but he held on, hauling her away from the opening. Sophie tumbled onto the floor, breath knocked out of her. Daniel stood over her, chest heaving. His eyes were wild now, the mask gone. He grabbed the knife from the floor. Sophie scrambled back on her elbows, blood on her palms, leaving smears on the wood. Daniel lifted the knife, not high like in movies, but low, practical. Sophie's stomach turned. She tried to push herself up, but a wave of dizziness rolled over her, heavy and slow. Her limbs felt thicker, like moving through syrup. Oh God, it had been working already. Daniel crouched, knife still in hand, and reached out with his free hand like he was going to stroke her hair. "It's going to be okay," he murmured. "You'll calm down. You'll stop trying to run. And then we can." Sophie's survival instincts screamed. She turned her head and bit his hand. Hard, teeth sinking into skin. Daniel jerked back with a shout. He slapped her, not with full force, but enough to snap her head sideways. Stars exploded in Sophie's vision. Rage twisted Daniel's face. "Stop," he snarled. "Stop making me do this." Sophie's cheek burned. Her ears rang. She tasted blood in her mouth. Daniel stood abruptly, stepping away, breathing hard. He ran his bitten hand under the faucet in the kitchen sink, muttering to himself. Always, he hissed. Always like this. Sophie pushed herself up, swaying. Her vision tunneled at the edges. The drug, whatever it was pulling her downward like gravity. But Daniel had turned his back. She looked at the broken window. Too far. She looked at the door, locked. She looked down the hallway, dark. And then she saw something. A small door in the corner of the living room, half hidden behind a bookshelf. A basement door. It was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beyond it. Sophie's heart stuttered. Basements were where secrets lived, but secrets could also mean exits, cellar windows, old storm doors. Her legs felt unsteady, but she moved quiet, careful. Each step was an effort. The floor seemed to tilt. Daniel's voice drifted from the sink. You could have been easy, he muttered. You could have been perfect. Sophie reached the basement door and slipped through it. The air changed instantly, colder, damp, smelling of earth and old wood. She felt along the wall for a light switch. Her fingers found one. She flipped it. A single bulb flickered on, weak and yellow, illuminating steep stairs descending into a cellar. The steps were worn, splintered. The darkness below looked thick enough to touch. Sophie started down. Each stair creaked. She held her breath, praying the creaks blended with the sound of running water in the kitchen. At the bottom, the basement opened into a wide space with stone walls and a concrete floor. Shelves lined one side, canned goods, jars, boxes. A workbench sat under a window covered with plywood. Tools hung neatly on a pegboard. It looked like an ordinary basement until Sophie's eyes adjusted and she saw the stains. Dark marks on the floor near a drain. Not fresh, but not old enough to be forgotten. The faint metallic smell that didn't belong to earth or wood. Sophie's stomach rolled. She moved deeper, toward a second door at the far end. A heavy door, metal, with a padlock. Her breath hitched. She heard faintly Daniel upstairs. The faucet shut off. Footsteps, slow. Sophie's panic spiked. She turned away from the locked metal door and scanned the room again. There, behind a stack of crates, a narrow hallway leading into darkness. She stumbled toward it. The hallway was tighter, dug into the foundation like an afterthought. The bulb's light didn't reach far. The air grew colder, the smell sharper. And then she heard it. A sound, not the settling of an old house, not the creak of boards, a human sound, a low, weak moan. Sophie froze. Her pulse thudded in her ears. The moan came again, followed by a muffled sob. Someone was down here. Sophie took a shaky step forward. The darkness swallowed her. The hallway opened into a small room, and in that room, under a bare bulb, was a chair. A wooden chair bolted to the floor, and strapped to it, a woman. Her head lolled forward, hair tangled. Her face was pale, bruised. Duct tape covered her mouth. Her wrists were bound to the chair arms with rope that bit into skin, her ankles tied too. She wore a dress, red, like it had been chosen for the day. Her eyes lifted slowly, unfocused at first. Then they found Sophie. Terror flared in them. The woman tried to speak through the tape. It came out as a muffled, panicked noise. She shook her head desperately, as if warning Sophie. Sophie's throat closed. She staggered closer. "Oh my God," Sophie whispered, voice cracking. "Oh my God." The woman's eyes filled with tears. Sophie's gaze darted around the room. There were other things in here. A table with a camera, a tripod, a stack of printed photos, Polaroids, spilling onto the floor. In each photo, a woman, different women, different nights, but the same chair, the same bulb, the same angle. And on the wall, above the chair, a calendar, a year calendar, Valentine's Day circled in thick red marker. Multiple years, each February 14th circled. Each circle had a name written beside it, in careful handwriting, like a guest list. Sophie's stomach dropped through the floor. He'd done this before, many times. The woman in the chair made another muffled sound, pleading. Sophie snapped into motion. She reached for the tape on the woman's mouth, and then she heard Daniel's voice behind her. "So you found the heart of the house," he said softly. Sophie whirled. Daniel stood in the hallway entrance, blocking it. The knife was back in his hand. His bitten hand hung at his side, dripping water. His expression was calm now, almost disappointed. Sophie stepped between him and the woman in the chair, instinctively, though her legs shook. Daniel's gaze slid past Sophie to the captive woman. His lip curled slightly. "She's been noisy," he said, as if discussing a pet. "I told her tonight was special, that she had to behave." Sophie's voice trembled. "Let her go." Daniel looked amused. "Let her go, Sophie." He took a step into the room. "Don't you see? This is what you walked into. This is what you accepted when you came." Sophie shook her head hard. "No." Daniel's eyes darkened. "Yes," he said. "You did. You wanted something different, something exciting. You were tired of your quiet little life. And so you came. And now you're here." Sophie's mind raced. Her body felt heavy and slow. The drug was still in her system, dragging her down. She had one chance. She looked at the table with the camera, at the tripod, at the edge of the metal stand. Then she moved. She lunged sideways, grabbing the tripod and swinging it like a bat. The metal legs slammed into Daniel's shoulder. He grunted, stumbling back a step. Sophie swung again, harder, catching his arm. The knife fell, clattering on concrete. The sound was sharp in the small room. Daniel's face twisted with fury. Sophie threw the tripod aside and dove for the knife. But Daniel tackled her. They hit the floor hard. Sophie's breath whooshed out. Daniel's weight crushed her. His hands clamped around her wrists, pinning them to the ground. His face hovered inches from hers, eyes blazing. "You ruin everything," he hissed. Sophie struggled, but her limbs were sluggish, heavy with drug and fear. Daniel's gaze flicked past her to the captive woman, then back. His mouth curled into a smile that made Sophie's skin crawl. "No," he murmured. "No, you know what? It's fine, it's fine." His voice softened suddenly, soothing. "I can work with this." He released one wrist and reached for something at his belt. A syringe. Sophie's blood turned to ice. She bucked hard, trying to throw him off. But Daniel caught her arm and pressed the syringe to the inside of her elbow. "Shush," he whispered. "This will help." Sophie screamed. The sound echoed off stone. The captive woman thrashed in her chair, making muffled cries through tape. Sophie's scream turned into a sob as Daniel pushed the needle in. Then, a sound from upstairs. A sudden, sharp pounding on the front door. Daniel froze. Sophie froze too, heart jolting with hope. The pounding came again, loud, insistent. A voice faint but clear through the floorboards. "Sophie, Sophie, are you in there?" "Lena." Sophie's eyes flooded with tears. She tried to scream again, but Daniel slapped a hand over her mouth, hard. His face was a mask of rage now, not at Sophie, at the interruption. He hissed low and vicious. "I told you, no calls." He shoved Sophie away from him and stood, snatching the fallen knife from the floor. He looked down at her with a cold finality. "Stay," he said, like a command to a dog. Then he turned and sprinted out of the room, up the basement stairs. Sophie lay there shaking, lungs burning. The needle she didn't know if he'd fully injected. She didn't feel the immediate rush of something new, but she felt dizzy, weak, terrified. The pounding upstairs continued. Sophie opened the door. Lena's voice. Daniel's footsteps thudded across the floor above. Sophie forced herself up, stumbling to the chair. The captive woman's eyes were wide with frantic hope and fear. Sophie grabbed at the rope binding her wrists, hands slick with blood from her scraped palms. The knots were tight, deliberate. She yanked, her fingers trembled, her nails tore. The woman sobbed through the tape. "I'm trying," Sophie whispered. "I'm trying." Upstairs, Lena's voice grew louder. "Sophie, if you're in there, say something." Sophie opened her mouth to scream, but Daniel shouted over her, his voice turning sharp. "Get off my property." Then a sound like a scuffle, a muffled thud. Lena's voice cut off abruptly. Sophie's blood froze. "No," she whispered. The captive woman behind her made a sound of pure fear. Sophie ripped at the rope again, desperation giving her strength. She found a weak point. The fibers strained. The woman's wrists slipped free. Sophie ripped the tape from her mouth. The woman gasped, sucking air like she'd been drowning. He's going to kill us," she choked. Sophie grabbed her shoulders. "We're getting out," she said, though she wasn't sure how. The woman's eyes darted toward the metal door. "There's more," she whispered, voice shaking. There's more in there." Sophie's stomach dropped. More people. The woman nodded, tears streaming. I heard them. I heard, she broke off, sobbing. Sophie forced herself to focus. What's your name? The woman swallowed. Jessa, she whispered. My name is Jessa. Sophie said quickly. We need to get out. Can you walk? Jessa tried to stand. Her legs buckled. She grabbed the chair for balance, trembling violently. I can, she whispered. I can, just my legs. Sophie looked around. There had to be another exit, a cellar door, a window. She spotted the plywood-covered basement window above the workbench. If they could pry it. She grabbed a hammer from the pegboard and hurried to the workbench, pulling at the plywood nails. The hammer shook in her hands. She slammed it under the edge and levered. The plywood creaked, resisted. Upstairs, Lena's voice returned, strained, furious. Sophie, answer me. Sophie's heart lurched. Lena was alive. She ripped at the plywood again. Nails squealed. The board came free. Cold air rushed in. Behind the plywood was a small window, too small to climb through easily, but maybe. Sophie grabbed the hammer and smashed the glass. It shattered outward, spilling shards into the snow. Wind howled in. Jessa limped to her side, shaking. Sophie, she whispered urgently. He has a gun. Sophie's heart slammed. How do you know? Jessa's eyes were haunted. I saw it when he brought me down here. He showed me. He said he likes to save bullets for interruptions. Upstairs, footsteps pounded again. Daniel was coming back down. Sophie's mind raced. The window was their only chance. She grabbed Jessa's arm. You first, she hissed. Go. Jessa looked at the broken window like it was a mouth full of teeth. But she nodded. She clambered onto the workbench, grimacing, then ducked and began to push herself through the frame. Her dress snagged. She gasped. Sophie shoved it free. Jessa slid out and dropped into the snow with a muffled cry. Sophie turned back toward the basement. Daniel's footsteps were on the stairs now. The light above flickered as he descended. Sophie clambered onto the bench, swinging a leg up. The door at the top of the stairs slammed open. Daniel's silhouette appeared, knife in hand. His face twisted in rage. He saw the broken window, saw the missing plywood, saw Sophie halfway through. His eyes widened with something like panic. No, he snarled, sprinting down the steps. Sophie shoved herself through the window frame, glass biting her sleeves. She scraped her shoulder on the edge. Pain lanced. Behind her, Daniel was closer. She dropped. The snow swallowed her up to the knees, shocking cold. She stumbled, nearly falling. Jessa was already moving, limping through the snow toward the tree line. Sophie grabbed her hand. Run, she gasped. They ran, Sophie dragging, Jessa stumbling, the snow slowing them. Behind them, a crash. Daniel had come through the window too. A curse ripped from him, furious and animal. He was in the snow, boots pounding, faster than he should be. Sophie's lungs burned. The drug still weighed her limbs. The forest ahead looked endless and dark. Then a sound split the night. A gunshot. The echo rolled through the trees. Jessa screamed. Sophie felt something punch the air near her ear. A whine and a crack as a bullet hit a tree. Daniel was behind them, now holding a pistol. "Stop," he shouted. "Stop." Sophie didn't stop. They plunged into the trees, branches whipping their faces. Snow fell from pine boughs in cold bursts. The ground was uneven, hidden roots and rocks beneath white. Another gunshot, a sharp cry from Jessa. Sophie turned and saw Jessa stumble, clutching her side. Blood blossomed dark against red fabric. "No, no," Sophie choked, catching her as she fell. Jessa's eyes were huge, panicked. "Go," she gasped. "Go heal." Sophie dragged her upright. "We're going together," she whispered fiercely, though her voice shook. But Jessa's legs buckled again. Daniel's footsteps crunched closer. Sophie looked around wildly, and then she saw it. A shallow ravine ahead, a dip in the ground where the snow had drifted deep. Beyond it, the faintest hint of a road. Maybe the driveway looped around. Maybe there was a chance. Sophie hauled Jessa forward, half carrying her. Jessa wheezed, breath ragged. "I can't," she whispered. "Yes, you can," Sophie hissed, though tears burned in her eyes. They reached the ravine and slid down, snow swallowing them. The cold was brutal, biting. Sophie's hands went numb. Jessa moaned, shaking. Daniel's footsteps stopped at the edge above them. He stood silhouetted against the faint light from the house. His voice drifted down, calm again, almost gentle. "Sophie," he called, "come back." Sophie clamped a hand over Jessa's mouth, shaking, trying to keep her quiet. Daniel sighed. "I didn't want it to be like this," he said, conversational, like they were still at the table. "I wanted candlelight, music, a quiet night." His tone darkened. "But you always make it ugly." Sophie's teeth chattered. She pressed herself into the snow, trying to become part of it. Daniel's boots crunched as he began to circle the ravine, looking for a way down. Sophie's mind screamed, "Think, think, think." Her car, her phone, Lena. Lena had come. Lena had confronted him. And now Lena. Sophie swallowed a sob. She checked her pocket with numb fingers. Her phone was still there. She pulled it out, screen dim. One bar flickered. Her hands shook so badly, she almost dropped it. She opened her messages. Typed to Lena. "Help basement, he has others, call police." Her fingers hovered. She hit send. The message spun, then delivered. Sophie's breath hitched. Maybe Lena was alive. Maybe the phone had delivered because Lena's phone was still active. Maybe. A sound above. Daniel's voice again, closer. "There you are," he murmured. Sophie looked up. Daniel had found a slope down into the ravine. He was descending, pistol in one hand, knife in the other, moving carefully but confidently, his eyes fixed on Sophie. On Jessa, his mouth curled. "I told you," he said softly. No one comes. Sophie's body moved before her mind could. She grabbed a rock from beneath the snow-cold rough and hurled it with all her strength. It struck Daniel's face. He grunted, stumbling. The pistol fired accidentally, another deafening crack, sending a bullet into the trees. Sophie surged up, hauling Jessa with her. She pushed Jessa forward toward the far slope, toward the hint of road. Daniel roared, wiping blood from his nose, fury snapping something in him. He lunged. Sophie shoved Jessa ahead and turned, swinging her fists, her nails, anything. She clawed at Daniel's eyes. He grabbed her hair, yanking her back painfully. She screamed, kicking, but he slammed her into the ravine wall. Her vision went white. Daniel's face was close, twisted with rage. You were supposed to be special, he hissed. You were supposed to be mine. Sophie spat blood. Go to hell, she choked. Daniel's eyes glittered. He raised the knife. And then, a sound from the road. An engine. Headlights sweeping through trees. A car. Daniel froze. Sophie froze too, heart jolting. The headlights grew brighter, closer, crunching on snow. A horn blared. Then a voice shouted male, unfamiliar. Hey, what the hell is going on? Daniel's eyes darted toward the sound, calculating. He grabbed Sophie's wrist and yanked her upward, trying to drag her back toward the trees, away from the road. Sophie fought with everything left. She twisted, wrenched, and managed to rip free for a second. She screamed loud and desperate, "Help, please." The headlights swung, illuminating the ravine. A man's silhouette appeared at the edge, holding a flashlight. Jesus, the man said, voice cracking. Are you? Daniel moved fast, too fast. He lifted the pistol. Sophie's blood went cold. No, she screamed. The gun fired. The man at the edge jerked back, disappearing from view with a cry. Sophie sobbed, horror choking her. Daniel's face was blank now, pure, efficient cruelty. He turned back to Sophie. Now you've ruined it, he said softly. But the shot had done something else. In the distance, faintly, another sound rose. Sirens. Far at first, then closer. Daniel's head snapped up. His eyes narrowed. Sirens weren't supposed to happen out here. No service, no neighbors, no one comes. Unless Lena had called. Unless Sophie's message had reached her. Daniel's expression twisted into something feral. You, he whispered, staring at Sophie like she'd betrayed him in the deepest way. He lifted the pistol toward her. And then a voice. Lena's voice rang out from the road, fast and furious. Drop it. Sophie's head snapped toward the sound. Lena stood there, staggering but upright, blood at her hairline. She held something in her hands, a tire iron. Her eyes were wild with terror and rage. Daniel's gaze flicked to her, contemptuous. You, he sneered. You're persistent. Lena took a step forward. Drop it. Sirens grew louder now, cutting through the woods. Daniel's jaw clenched. His eyes darted, calculating escape routes, timing distance. He wasn't panicking. He was adjusting. He pointed the pistol at Lena. Sophie screamed, "Lena!" Lena didn't flinch. "Do it," she hissed. "Do it, and the cops will find you with a warm gun in your hand." Daniel smiled, cold, cruel. "They'll find me gone," he said. He turned suddenly, grabbing Sophie again, dragging her toward the trees like a shield. Sophie fought, clawing, kicking. Lena sprinted forward, tire iron raised. Daniel saw her coming and lifted the pistol again. Jessa appeared from behind a tree, swaying, blood-soaked, but alive, and slammed a rock into Daniel's head with what little strength she had left. Daniel staggered. The pistol flew from his hand. Sophie ripped free. Lena swung the tire iron with both hands. It connected with Daniel's skull with a dull, horrifying crack. Daniel collapsed into the snow. For a moment, the woods were silent, except for Sophie's ragged breathing. Then Daniel moved. A twitch, a groan. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, still alive. He tried to push himself up. Lena's face twisted with something primal. She lifted the tire iron again, trembling. Sophie grabbed her arm. "Lena," she choked. "Stop." Lena's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Sophie's bloodied hands, her torn dress, her bruised face. "He was going to kill you." "I know," Sophie whispered. Sirens screamed closer now. Flashing lights lit the trees in red and blue pulses. Daniel's gaze sharpened suddenly. He looked at the lights like a predator, realizing the hunt had turned. He tried to crawl. Sophie stepped forward and kicked the pistol farther into the snow. Daniel's eyes met hers. In them, Sophie saw something that chilled her more than the gun. Not remorse, not fear, only a quiet, burning certainty. He would do it again if he lived. He would try. Daniel's lips parted. "Sophie," he whispered, and her name was still that same leash, even now. Sophie's stomach clenched. She backed away, shaking. Police voices shouted from the road. "Hands, hands where we can see them." Lena dropped the tire iron, raising her hands. Sophie raised hers too, trembling. Jessa collapsed into the snow, sobbing. Flashlights blinded them. Boots crunched closer. Officers poured into the ravine. Guns raised, shouting commands. One officer knelt beside Daniel, handcuffing him swiftly, efficiently. Another wrapped a blanket around Jessa. Someone grabbed Sophie gently, pulling her aside. "Sophie," an officer asked, voice urgent. "Are you Sophie?" Sophie nodded, throat too tight to speak. "We've got you," the officer said. "You're safe." Safe? The word felt unreal. Sophie looked past the officer to Daniel. He was on his side, face pressed into snow, hands cuffed behind his back. Blood ran from his hairline. His eyes were open, watching, even now, as if memorizing her. An officer hauled him up. Daniel's gaze stayed, locked on Sophie. Then he smiled faintly, a smile that promised this wasn't over. Sophie's skin went cold. Hours later, Sophie sat wrapped in a blanket in the back of an ambulance, hands bandaged, face bruised, hair tangled. Lena sat beside her, holding her hand so tightly it hurt. Jessa lay on a stretcher nearby, oxygen mask on, eyes half closed, still alive. The paramedic asked Sophie questions. What did he give you? How much did you drink? Did you eat? Did you feel dizzy? And Sophie answered in a haze. Police searched the farmhouse. They brought people out. More victims. Some alive. Some not. Sophie didn't see them directly, but she saw the way the officers' faces changed when they emerged tight, grim, haunted. She heard a detective whisper to another. Calendar, names, photos. This guy, been doing this every year. Every year. Valentine's Day circled in red. A ritual, a compulsion. Sophie's stomach rolled again. Lena's voice trembled beside her. I got there, and he tried to shove me off the porch, she whispered. He hit me. I fell, I thought, she choked. I thought you were dead. Sophie squeezed her hand weakly. You saved me, Sophie whispered. Lena shook her head violently. You saved yourself, she said. You fought. Sophie closed her eyes, seeing Daniel's smile, hearing his voice. There you are. She thought of the women in the photos, of the names in red marker, of the careful way he'd set the table, the warmth in the house, the roses like blood. She thought of how he'd watched her eat, how he'd said food is love, how love had been used like a trap. The ambulance doors closed softly, muffling the sounds outside. Sirens, voices, footsteps. Sophie stared at her hands, bandaged, trembling. She wondered how many women had sat at that table, thinking they were simply lonely on Valentine's Day. Thinking, like she had, that it could be nice, that it could be different, that someone's kindness might be real. And she wondered how many had realized too late that the warmth was only there to make the cold feel worse. In the weeks that followed, Briar Hollow changed. The decorations came down, the ribbons vanished, the heart-shaped cookies were thrown away. The florist window went dark for days. People spoke in hushed voices. They avoided Sophie at first, the way small towns avoid what scares them. Then they flooded her with sympathy, casseroles, invitations, gentle looks that were meant to be kind and felt like knives. Sophie took leave from the library. She slept poorly. She jumped at sounds. Every time she saw a red rose in a store, her stomach clenched. The police interviewed her repeatedly. They asked about Daniel's words, his habits, his dinner, the ring box. One detective, a tired-eyed woman with gray streaks in her hair, said quietly, You did the right thing fighting. Most people freeze. Sophie didn't feel brave. She felt lucky. Daniel's farmhouse became a crime scene, a place no one wanted to look at directly. Eventually, the authorities boarded it up. But even boarded up, it looked like it was listening. The town had always been quiet. Now it was quiet in a different way, a silence with teeth. One evening in early March, Sophie sat at her kitchen table, a mug of tea cooling between her hands. Lena was on speakerphone, checking in like she always did now. "You okay?" Lena asked gently. Sophie stared out her window at the streetlight, haloed by fog. "I'm here," she said, which was the most honest answer. Lena sighed. "They moved him to county," she said. "He's going to trial. They have enough. Photos, evidence, bodies." Sophie's throat tightened. "Don't," she whispered. "Sorry," Lena said quickly. "Sorry. He's not getting out. Okay. He's not coming back." Sophie wanted to believe that. After they hung up, Sophie sat alone in the quiet. She forced herself to stand, to wash her mug, to move like a normal person. She went to the living room and turned on the TV, but the sound felt wrong, too bright. She turned it off again. Then her phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. Sophie's heart stopped. Her fingers went numb. She stared at the screen without touching it. The message preview appeared. "Happy Valentine's Day, Sophie." Sophie's breath left her in a thin, terrified sound. It was March. Valentine's Day had been weeks ago. Her hands shook as she opened the message. "Happy Valentine's Day, Sophie. You were the best one, the one who fought. I'll always remember you." Sophie's blood turned to ice. She stared, frozen, as if the words were a hand reaching through the screen to grab her. Then another message arrived. A photo. Sophie's stomach lurched as the image loaded. It was her, a photo of her walking down Main Street in Briar Hollow, taken from a distance. She wore her coat, her collar up. The day before Valentine's. The day she'd received Daniel's text. Someone had been watching her. Still, Sophie's vision tunneled. She couldn't breathe. She dropped the phone as if it burned. It hit the floor with a dull thud. For a long moment, she couldn't move. Then she forced herself to pick it up again, fingers trembling. The number was unfamiliar. She turned the phone over to see if it was somehow tainted. It was just a phone, just glass and metal. But the message was real, and it meant one thing. Daniel had help, or Daniel had a follower, or Daniel had planned for this, planned for the part after. Sophie's mind flashed to the table. The camera, the calendar, the names. Had he worked alone? Or had someone been writing names beside those dates too? Sophie stood abruptly, grabbing her coat with shaking hands. She didn't think. She moved on instinct, like an animal fleeing a fire. She ran to her car. She drove to Lena's temporary rental in town, because Lena had refused to leave after what happened. Because Lena had said, "I'm not letting you be alone." Sophie burst into Lena's place, breathless, phone in hand. Lena took one look at her face and went pale. "What?" Sophie held out the phone. Lena read the messages, her expression hardening into fury and fear. "Call the detective," Lena said immediately. Sophie nodded, hands shaking too badly to dial. Lena took the phone, dialed, put it on speaker. The detective answered after 2 rings. Her voice was tired, wary. "Detective Givens." "It's Lena," Lena said, voice tight. "We got a message. From an unknown number, it says." She swallowed hard. "It says Happy Valentine's Day, Sophie. And there's a photo." Silence on the line. Then Detective Givens said quietly, "Do not delete it. Do not respond. I'm sending someone to you now." Lena's jaw clenched. "He's in custody," she hissed. "How?" Detective Givens' voice cut through, calm but grim. "He's been making calls," she said. "We blocked what we could. But sometimes they find ways. And sometimes they're not alone." Sophie's skin went numb. After they hung up, Lena grabbed Sophie's hands. "Listen to me," she said fiercely. "We're not doing this. We're not letting him haunt you from a cell. We're not letting some creep scare you into hiding." Sophie swallowed, tears burning. "What if someone's out there?" she whispered. "What if he, what if they?" Lena's eyes were fierce. "Then we fight," she said, "like you did." Sophie's chest heaved. She nodded, not because she felt brave, but because she didn't know what else to do. They sat together in the dim light, waiting for the police. Listening to the wind outside rattle the window panes like fingernails. And as Sophie stared at her phone, at the photo of herself walking down a street she thought was safe, one thought kept pulsing in her mind like a second heartbeat. Valentine's Day wasn't just a date on a calendar. For some people, it was hunting season, and sometimes the hunt didn't end when the hunter was caught. Thanks for listening. This has been Whispers in the Dark. Please like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment with the word rose. And remember, not every candlelit dinner is romance. Good night.
Whispers of a love so true, painting dreams of me and you. And I'll hold you close in this moment.